Be careful, he might bite, and I'm not talking about the dog. Hey, welcome to the Toy Box, everybody. I'm your host, Andrew M., and today we're going to be doing a figure spotlight on the 2005 Mutt. This is actually the 7th version of Mutt to be released in the G.I. Joe Real American Hero line. As with a lot of characters in the line after the year 2000, there were random words and ranks and other things put in with the character names so that the trademark could be utilized by Hasbro when releasing them. So this is actually Sergeant Mutt, and he's the only version of the character who has that particular moniker. Mutt is the canine officer of the G.I. Joe team, which makes him a bit unique. There are other members on the team who have, very dedicated animal sidekicks, and that's been a big part of G.I. Joe since its very earliest years. Mutt is probably the most well-known and definitely the most prolific. There's more versions of him than any other animal-centric G.I. Joe character. This particular one was released in 2005, and he was released as direct-to-consumer, which means that Hasbro sold him directly on their own website. And although other online retailers could purchase them from Hasbro and resell them on to others, you couldn't go into a store and find this one. And that entire series was like this, and they did that throughout 2005, the end half of that year, and all of 2006. In any event, Mutt is a huge dog lover, which means I know he'll be popular with some of my friends who are big dog lovers. He is much more animalistic when dealing with people than he is dealing with his canine friends. When he's dealing with his canine friends, he's talking to them like you would speak to your best friend or your younger sibling. But when he deals with people, he's very gruff, rough around the edges, doesn't really, like dealing with people. He growls randomly. It's a bit of a caricature, I think. But it works for the character because he has such a close affiliation and love for his, animal partners. I love this figure for the sculpting and molding on it. It's fantastic. He does not have any reused pieces. In fact, I don't believe that any pieces of him were reused later on the line. He does feature what I call the Type 2 G.I. Joe body type, where it is the original elastic holding him together, and he has the standard articulation, of course, but the feeling of the plastic and the overall aesthetic is very different from those early 80s and 90s figures, but it allows for a lot more detail, a lot more intricate pieces, and although he doesn't have any interactive things like a removable knife sheath or a pistol holster or anything like that, he's still really great in terms of his molding and sculpting. I love how his right arm is the bigger dog handler arm, bite guard. That's just a nice little touch. His colors are very basic, very military. They feel true to life. Although he's got that orange vest going on, it's not obnoxious. It's a very muted color. So it differentiates him without being too crazy, like last week's spotlight on Clutch, who's just this giant orange glowing ball of shoot me, I'm right here. Mutt's actually dressed a bit more realistically. The other thing I'll note is that this mask that's on his head is actually a separate piece. It is removable, but only if you disassemble the figure and pop the head off. There's no way to get it off. I couldn't stretch that in any way, shape, or form to make that come off of his head. But they're trying to recreate what the original 1984 Mutt figure did. He had the full helmet and face mask. Why this Mutt figure is suddenly clean-shaven, A, and B, has this strange mask that is not removable, I do not know, but it does make, like I say, it makes a unique look for him, so it works. In terms of accessories, of course, his most important accessory, and the secondary character that is included, is his loyal friend, Junkyard. Junkyard, unfortunately, is not articulated in any way. He's a solid piece of plastic, but for the first time, Junkyard is actually painted. Yes, we didn't just get a black piece of plastic. It looks like a dog. We finally got an animal companion who's got, nice shading around the paws, and they actually, painted in his mouth and Although it's really hard to see in the video, they did actually paint his eyes a slightly different color, and he's got some nice paint wipes and shading all throughout, which is a really cool touch. I really like the fact they did that. It was a big selling point to me on getting this figure, because you can't have Mutt without Junkyard. And all throughout the 80s and 90s, the animals were just these monochromatic, usually black, hunks of plastic that were molded, and they were, decently detailed, I guess, for their time. But as an example, they were flat, they were glossy, whereas this Mutt, you can see there's actually some sculpted in hair and fur. Like that's beautifully done. So I have nothing but good things to say about that. In terms of his other accessories, Mutt only came with 2. They were very light on the weapons for these direct-to-consumer figures, I found, for the most part. But he did come with his trusty nightstick. And he came with this really cool, I like this rifle that was included. It's a very different design. It looks like it, maybe could be real, but I can't match this up to any weapon that I know of in the real world. But it's a neat little rifle. It's got a rear reloading clip, and overall, I think the figure is very functional. Although my biggest critique is that it doesn't look like Mutt. And what I mean by that, I'm gonna whip out the 1992 version. This is like version 3 of the character, which he serves not only as proof that not all 90s characters were absurdly, overly brightly colored, but the head on this figure is what I really want to draw attention to. This looks like Mutt, the way the character has been portrayed in the cartoon, the comic books, all the previous action figures up until the release of today's Spotlight. He's got that mustache and that, more dour expression on his face, like he's ready to, give you some rabies himself. Whereas this Mutt, for whatever reason, this could be anybody. I mean, he looks like so many other figures of the same era. I actually had to check and make sure the head wasn't a repaint of somebody else, that it was reused. It is original, but it doesn't look original compared to a lot of other figures of the time. There's not a lot more to say about this one, other than that I really do appreciate the attention to detail with the bite guard arm, which wasn't something that every Mutt figure featured. I love the fact that they gave Junkyard an actual paint job and really went to town on the detailing. Back in 2005, it was not very common to see, detailing of that level. I can even see now, right now, for the very first time, that the collar is a separately molded in piece. Like that's not a removable accessory or anything, but just the level of detail is so great that I hadn't even noticed fully everything. This is the end of the figure spotlights for a little bit, guys. I'm actually going to be doing something very different. I'm reorganizing my basement, and very soon we're going to be doing a vehicle spotlight for the first time on the channel. If you have any feedback as to what you'd like to see, hey, don't be afraid to pipe up, let me know. I'm finally going to have the complete collection on display, probably as of the next video that I post. So we'll be doing a redo of the video tour part 2, and we'll be doing a spotlight on a vehicle from my collection for the first time. It'll be something very different. I hope to see you all out there in Toyland, and of course, please like, share, and subscribe to your heart's content.